Given the choice, whether to rule a corrupt and failing empire, or to challenge the fates for another throw, a better throw against one's destiny. What was a king to truly have a choice? One can only match, move by move, the machinations of fate, and thus defy the tyrannous stars.
So at long last, we are finally here, at the finale of Legacy of Kain. So far, anyway. Here's hoping it won't be. Though unfortunately, it seems that Square Enix has a considerable lack of interest in Legacy of Kain as a brand and just wants to bury it. But that's a story for another time. Finding the development history for this game is a little harder than the others. The wiki, which is usually my go-to for this kind of information, doesn't have much in the way of Defiance's gameplay. After the mostly negative reception of Blood Omen 2, what started as Soul Reaver 3, the decision was made to try to wrap up the series' lingering questions, or at least as much as they could. After all, sales had been gradually declining, and the team wasn't sure if they'd get another game. Carol Wolf, who wrote the dialogue for much of the game's scenes, mentioned that she was told the story by Amy Henning, and would go off to write the scenes, take them back to Henning, who would review them. After all, it was her story. But once again, the decision was made to remove some items, as it tends to unfortunately happen with these games. Designer Riley Cooper felt that one of the things they were able to achieve was a more rounded camera system, improving from past games. One thing we were able to take away and build on from pre-production was our spleen-based camera system. We developed its primary functionality, and we were very excited about the opportunity to present an LOK game cinematically during gameplay, as opposed to just during cutscenes. This was a win over the standard follow camera, which always shows the world from the same perspective and the character from the same distance. In executing, we were able to achieve the above, but found it to be a steep learning curve for proper implementation, and quite a bit more work than using a follow camera. While we were able to achieve the more cinematic presentation of gameplay that we had hoped to, we are very interested in improving upon how we use it. Our realization is that the more playing you do for spleen-based cameras, the better they will be. They can't be fought through too much. Acknowledging that the combat system in Soul Reaver 2 could be better, the team sought to improve upon that with Defiance. They decided to have players create their own combos, rather than be predefined by combos they put in. There were 3 forms of attack: combo button, vertical attack, and projectile, and the player could mix them in and figure out how to go from there. The game definitely faces production hurdles, but at the end of the day, they were proud of it. Development of the game was anything but smooth. Henning remarked that Crystal Dynamics went through many structural changes during the game's development, and this had an effect on the game as everyone had their own idea on what it should be. But we've got a story to cover.
My name is Raziel, his name is Kain. We are together once again.
Our story begins right when Soul Reaver 2 ends. Kain is still stuck in the past, searching for Raziel. With no other leads, he decides to visit Mobius at his fortress. As Kain searches for Mobius, and then subsequently Raziel, who finds that 500 years have passed since the end of Soul Reaver 2, which has put him exactly at the time that the original Blood Omen is taking place. Fortunately, they avoided any paradoxes by never having Raziel encounter the younger Kain. Raziel searches for a means to avert his fate of being trapped inside the Soul Reaver. Kain also seeks Raziel to spare him of his fate, but also because Raziel is the one unbound creature, the one who has a choice in this wheel of fate. But on what edge will the coin turn? Towards salvation or damnation? Kain is once again voiced by Simon Templeman. Kain has grown far more thoughtful and introspective of what has transpired under his rule. In the 2 Soul Reaver games, we didn't get to see much of Kain's perspective of what had happened under his rule.
How strange to see this place long before my birth. Centuries before the corruption set in that would poison the land and put me on the treacherous path I still followed. In the future, These edifices would be condemned to darkness and decay. I would cause their fall and build my empire upon their ruins. Was it still possible that with the right knowledge, the right moves, I might one day see Nosgoth restored, the pillars pure once more? My answer, according to Mobius, lay somewhere to the west of this place. I could restore the world, perhaps, but never again could I give Nosgoth back her innocence.
Kain still maintains his viciousness and thirst for combat.
Help me! Help me! Oh, please, no!
From time to time, it is necessary to feed. And the unusual event of a feast prepared by the Sarafan must be savored.
We'll come back to him because in some of the sections for other characters, Kain will undoubtedly come up again. Raziel is once again voiced by Michael Bell. Starting out confined to the other god for 500 years, Raziel, on a mark of defiance, is able to escape his progenitor.
Clearly my escape had not been anticipated, or my benevolent master would not have expended such efforts to prevent me from going. And if my departure displeased him, then that was a victory, however small, for me.
Because of this, Raziel is unable to use the pearls to switch to the material realm, but is able to find another way, possessing corpses.
In the end, it was not difficult. I projected myself down into that tomb, and found I was reborn into the material world. I was cursed with a loathsome and repugnant vessel. But with an effort of will, that too could change.
But as the one creature who has free will, everyone is trying to play Raziel to their advantage to stack things in their favor.
What game was this, where every player on the board claimed the same pawn?
So Raziel has realized he's being manipulated, but this ends up costing him dearly. We're going to come back to him as he and Kain connect to a larger plot. Mobius, played by Richard Doyle, is still the same as ever, a conniving snake. You can tell how smug he is when he gets the upper hand on Kain at the beginning of the game.
But your messianic delusions have blinded you to Raziel's true nature. You have no idea what you've unleashed. There was a time when you might have heeded wise counsel when it was offered. Now, your vanity has made you witless.
But Kain makes note to have a different footing the next time they encounter each other.
You cannot kill me. We both know that this is not how or when I die.
Death is not the only possible outcome.
He basically serves to tell Kain where to look for Raziel.
Yes, Raziel is shrouded from us, but we see the ripples of his potential actions, and every path he might choose leads to the same outcome. He will kill you, Kain.
He has one more scene before the end which shows that he went out of his way to taunt Raziel after killing Kain, even though at this point he should be dead at Blood Omen Kain's sword. It was explained that he took a portal forward in time to mock Raziel one last time before he went back to face his death. It was just done to give Raziel one last encounter with Mobius. We finally find out why he betrayed the vampires, as Kain explains. But we're not done with him yet. Mobius finally gets what's coming to him, and let's just say it's long overdue.
Well done, faithful servant. And now, I have an execution to see to.
Faithful servant, this. Spin on this, Mobius.
Vorador, voiced by the late Paul Lucifer, makes one last appearance, where he basically serves the purpose of showing Raziel that he has Janos' body. He's considerably more mellow than he was at this point in Blood Omen, which makes sense as you consider that Kain went back in time and changed history in Blood Omen, which kickstarted a revolt against vampires. This change probably made him more cautious than he was before. Supposedly this game was meant to explain how he was resurrected for Blood Omen 2, but the scene was cut for time. We do learn that Vorador was the first human to become a vampire, and that he was the one who forged the Soul Reaver.
Believing that it embodies the essence of our dark gift, they hid the heart away lest it fall into the wrong hands. Our hands. Redeem yourself. You may be our last hope. Perhaps you alone can find the heart if it is meant to be found.
Janos, voiced again by the late Rene Albergernis, returns to his usual role as exposition, something that is hilariously pointed out by the voice actors.
Oh, good, you have the big chunk. You have the big exposition. Thank you. Thank you for giving him the exposition. I haven't seen it yet. Well. I just waited for that page to turn.
I need a break to call my agent.
He wants to get paid by the word now.
Janos serves as the reason for why Raziel wants to find out why he is to be trapped inside the Soul Reaver, for it was forged for him, why did it try to destroy him? Unfortunately, Raziel resurrecting Janos allows him to be possessed, thus setting up the events of Blood Omen 2. But Raziel's not willing to let this go without a fight.
You deluded ghoul! Do you so wish to die a martyr for the vampire's lost cause?
You're not leaving this chamber. I will destroy Janos if I have to.
Very well, then. I'll indulge you.
In a rather surprising plot twist, Tyrell appears here, kept in the basement of Avernus. Almost seemed like they forgot that loose end from Soul Reaver, but finally we get to wrap it up. Tyrell is voiced by Greg Berger. At first you don't recognize him, but he seems to know Raziel. Then Raziel says his name and the scene takes an interesting turn. Why he's in the past is unexplained, though it was going to be explained in a future game.
No more questions. No more worship. Time to run. Time to scream. Time to die.
Mortanius makes another appearance, and we get more information. He and Mobius were the ones who rebelled against the vampires, but Mortanius came to regret what he did, and resurrecting Kain as a vampire was his way to atone for what he did. But sadly, he was a pawn of the Hilden Lord, as he struggles to maintain control of his actions. This paints his actions in Blood Omen in a different light. He also reveals that he used the Heart of Darkness to revive Kain.
Kain has it. It is in Kain.
Check and mate.
Voiced by Alistair Duncan instead of Tony J, which was done because it's incredibly obvious when it's Tony J, so his actor was changed in the game to avoid confusion.
The heart has served its function. I have used it to set prophecy in motion. I created the champion foretold by my masters, who is destined to be your destroyer. The Scion of Balance will save Nosgoth. The Pillars will return to vampire guardianship as intended, and your race will be cast down forever.
Ariel makes one last appearance, voiced again by Anna Gunn. Every time Raziel meets her, he goes back further in time, which makes it odd that Ariel has no memory of him. But the vision of Raziel absorbing her into the Soul Reaver comes to pass, as Ariel willingly allows it to happen, and finally sets herself free from her fate of being trapped for the Pillars, though they don't explain how her spirit traveled back through time, but hey, I guess that was for another game.
You have done well, Raziel. But there is one more trial for you to bear. You must unite what has been set asunder. Only then will the Scion of Balance be armed for his true endeavor.
The Elder God, voiced again by the late Tony J, finally takes over as the main antagonist. It was revealed that there was a prophecy that the Vampire Champion and the Hilden Champion would fight. Kain comes to believe that he is the Vampire Champion and Raziel's the Hilden Champion, but things are not as they seem. The outcome of the fight is ambiguous as the murals depict both champions as the victor, but which one is true?
I should have known I'd find you here.
Here and everywhere, now and always. I am the wheel and its turning. I am the circle of life and death.
And I am beginning to think the vampires committed suicide only to escape your voice.
The plot points converge when Kain and Raziel meet at Avernus. Kain doesn't really want to fight Raziel, but Raziel is not in the mood to listen.
The coin you tossed has struck the earth. Now you must abide by its outcome.
The coin is still turning, Raziel.
Why? If we are who we are, then are we not destined to fight to the death to decide the fate of Nosgoth?
Don't be a fool! I will not fight you!
And that will be the prophesied hero's battle? I win because you will not fight me? The mighty Kain, Scion of Balance, would-be savior of Nosgoth, surrenders before the final battle even begins!
Very well. If this will make you see reason...
The battle between Kain and Raziel rages, and eventually only one emerges triumphant. So it seems to end the story here, but Raziel is not the chosen one to save Nosgoth.
Your fate is trivial, Raziel. It was Kain's destiny that mattered all along.
The visuals of Legacy of Kain Defiance are pretty confident for the time. I played it on PS3, so there's a nice little HD upscale. Unfortunately though, games that had dark lighting back then don't always look so good on the HD TV, particularly the parts where you are swimming underwater. I had to turn the brightness all the way up just so I could see what I was doing. I wouldn't mind if they released HD remasters of these games, but it seems Square has no interest in the series. More on that another time. The voice acting is again a highlight. Just watching these talented voice actors do their thing is always a treat. The game runs well enough, but at one point I fell through the floor and I couldn't move, so I had to save and reload the game, which started me the current checkpoint. The music is fantastic, and the use of the Soul Reaver theme is very appropriate. Legacy of Kain Defiance takes on a more action approach. Kain and Raziel both play similarly, but have their own set of differences as well. For example, when opening a door, Raziel will open the door, but Kain will just kick it open.
Locked. What a love of doors these pathetic humans have.
That's pretty true. While Raziel will dodge with typical maneuvers, Kain will turn in the mist when he dodges an attack. By pressing the L1 button on PS2, your character will get into a fighting stance. You can attack with the square button. By pressing the triangle button, you can launch your enemy into the air and follow up with a combo, and it's actually pretty fun to come up with your own combos. You can also throw your enemies onto spikes to impale them. One little bit I liked was when I inadvertently threw someone into fire, and they ran around in a heap. Kain and Raziel have most of the abilities they gained from past games. Kain will miss through gates, while Raziel still has to switch to the spectral realm. It's a good blend of the two gameplays. Kain must search for the balance emblem for the Soul Reaver, which when the meter is filled he can unleash a special attack. By simply pressing the D-pad, you can switch to whichever part of the balance emblem you want. My favorite is when Kain slows down time and just beats up everybody. Raziel, on the other hand, has to endow the Wraith Blade with elements, despite having already did that in Soul Reaver 2. His Wraith Blade actually looks more like a sword this time, which is how it was supposed to look. Powering up the blade with a different element has different effects. The one I found myself using the most was the Dark Reaver, which turns Raziel invisible. Light just causes some bright light to happen. Fire can be used to light torches, which Kain can also do with his telekinesis. Water can freeze waterfalls, air can cause Raziel to ride wind currents, and earth can summon platforms for Raziel to jump on. One thing that's rather interesting is that both Kain and Raziel will often visit the same locations, just in different time periods. It's interesting to see how different things will be. Doors that are locked to Kain are open to Raziel, and vice versa. Raziel does get more boss battles, such as Tyrell, which is a pretty easy boss, as well as the Pillar Guardians, so he can endow the Reaver with elemental powers. Kain just gets statues.
These statues were singularly inanimate. I knew better than to assume they would always remain so.
If you lose all of your life, you simply restart at the next checkpoint. That being said, I do take issue with some things. There's no map, and some of these areas are pretty big, so you often have no idea where you're supposed to go. You get item, you take it to where you're supposed to go, but you get lost, and a lot of times I spent wandering around aimlessly. Warder's Mansion took nearly 3 hours because I wasn't sure where I was supposed to go. This is why the game should have a map system in place so you know where you're supposed to go if you get lost. You're supposed to get 3 spears, and that requires going all over the mansion. Hence why I believe that Raziel gets more playtime in this game than Kain does. Sometimes the gameplay does get repetitive, and the camera system is not very good, sadly. 3D games had a huge problem with cameras back then. You do unlock abilities for the combat as you level up and gain experience, but sadly it caps pretty quickly. You only learn 5 moves. After that, the only time you have to battle is when the exit is sealed shut or you need health. After resurrecting Yanos and watching him get possessed, Raziel is sent back to the Spectral Realm, where he finds the Elder God waiting for him, who resurrects Mobius shortly after his Blood Omen death. Elsewhere, Kain wakes up in a dimension where he is perfectly alive, despite having the Heart of Darkness ripped out of him. This is because of his role as the Sign of Balance, apparently. Sure. Kain fights his way out and finds Mobius, and Mobius' shock at Kain being alive is so incredibly satisfying.
First, your omniscience, and now your powers. You're slipping badly.
Kain dispatches Mobius, and after 5 games, you can't deny he hasn't had it coming.
Kill! This is not a debate. You see, this time, you have nothing that I want.
Raziel then proceeds to overkill Mobius by showing him the true form of the Elder God. Mobius takes it well.
No!
release you.
Your petty actions are irrelevant, Raziel. Mobius was a good servant, but he was of no further use. His long life had run its course.
Then why'd you resurrect him in the first place? But here's the moment where Raziel realizes what he is meant to do, what he can do. He may not be the chosen one to save Nosgoth, but he can make it right for Kain to do so.
It was then I knew what I had to do. I alone could end this.
The following scene where Raziel allows himself to be absorbed into the Soul Reaver is very well done. When asked if Raziel was the vampire or Hilden champion, Henning explained he's both. While he dooms himself to be trapped in the Reaver, he frees his future self from the blade at last by using it to purify Kain. So he saves and destroys himself at the same time.
Redeemer and Destroyer.
And even Kain looks saddened at Raziel's sacrifice.
And now you will see the true enemy.
Raziel. And it was then I saw.
So, I am revealed to you at last.
What in hell?
I still think Tony should be doing this in costume, but
yeah, well, I did.
It's very hard for me, but I'll try.
The stage is set for the final battle.
You would not fear us unless we could truly do you harm.
No! You are nothing!
False god. This is the end. The final turn of your wheel.
The final battle against the Elder God is pretty easy. All you have to do is destroy the tentacles and slash at the eye when the shield is down, so not really all that epic for the final battle in the whole series, which is partly because it wasn't supposed to be.
Don't destroy me, Kain. I am the engine of life itself. The wheel will turn, the plague of your kind will be purged from this world, and on that inevitable day, your wretched, stagnant soul will finally be mine.
In the meantime, you'd best burrow deep.
And on that final scene, Kain remarks that he finally feels a sense of hope for Nosgoth. And that is where Legacy of Kain ends. Not with every loose end wrapped up, I'm afraid. There was going to be a final chapter where Kain would return to the Soul Reaver era, and I'll give my thoughts on what that would have been like. Kain returns to the Soul Reaver era because he has to destroy the Elder God here. He cannot do so in any other time because it would cause a temporal paradox. Kain confronts the Elder God at the Pillars of Nosgoth. An epic battle ensues. The Elder God's tentacles wrap around the pillars, and Kain finally puts an end to him. The Pillars of Nosgoth can be restored with new vampire guardians, and Kain has finally redeemed the land he damned, setting Nosgoth free from the Elder God at last. But he has one last thing to do. Kain and Raziel must part ways one last time. Kain returns to the past at some point and leaves the Soul Reaver to be discovered so that Kain himself can find it in Blood Omen. Thanks to Raziel's sacrifice, Kain has freed Nosgoth. From there, he's free to return and do things. What kind of things are left to the audience's imagination. But on that note, Legacy of Kain would end. Sadly, though, it was not to be. This chapter was cut pretty early from the game. There was going to be a 6th game called Legacy of Kain: The Dark Prophecy, but it was cancelled pretty early into development, sadly. Defiance didn't sell very well, sadly, so Eidos didn't think another game would be worth the time and money. What's known about it is that the game would have shifted between past and present Kain as the protagonists. Amy Henning would leave Crystal Dynamics for uncharted waters. In 2006, a major blow towards finishing the series would be dealt as Tony J, the voice of the Elder God, would pass away at the age of 73. Since then, Paul Lucafor and Renee Auberjournes have also passed away. There was a game in development for the PlayStation 3 and later PlayStation 4 called Legacy of Kain: Dead Son that would have taken place long after Kain and Raziel. Square cancelled in 2012 when it was almost complete, and videos of the game do exist online. Nosgoth, the game's multiplayer, was also planned for release before Square pulled the plug. Kain and Raziel did appear as skins in Lara Croft and the Guardian of Light, but aside from that, the series is dead and Square seems to have no interest in the IP. A combination of outside factors, troubled development, and declining sales just brought the Legacy of Kain series to a sad, premature end. But despite that, the series still lives on in the memories of fans, and I can only hope in some form we will see a proper conclusion. Be it in a game, or a comic, or a movie, just give me something. Anything. Defy the tyranny of stars one last time and finish the legacy of Kain. But in that sense, though, Kain has left quite the legacy.
Now at last, the masks had fallen away. The strings of the puppets had become visible, and the hands of the Prime Mover exposed. Most ironic of all was the last gift that Raziel had given me. More powerful than the sword that now held his soul, more acute even than the vision his sacrifice had accorded me. The first bitter taste of that terrible illusion. Hope.
Thank you for watching. If you liked the video, please hit that bell, like, and subscribe button. If you want updates, follow me on Twitter or join my Discord, or if you want to support me, check out my Patreon. They are provided in the description below. See you all later.